Welcome to the programme. The British Parliament has voted to wrestle control of the legislative agenda away from Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government. It's the latest attempt to ensure the UK doesn't leave the EU next month without a deal. More than 20 Conservative MPs voted against their own government. In response, Boris Johnson confirmed he would call for a general election. But as Evelyn Laverick reports, even that could be derailed.
The ayes to the right, 328. The noes to the left, 301.
Not a good start, Boris.
In a late-night vote, opposition MPs and Tory rebels defeated the government, seizing control of the legislative agenda. It means they will now be bringing forward a bill seeking to delay the UK's exit date from the EU. And moments later, this happened.
I don't want an election, but if MPs vote tomorrow to stop negotiations and to compel another pointless delay to Brexit, potentially for years, then that would be the only way to resolve this. And I can confirm that we are tonight tabling a motion under the Fixed Term Parliament Act.
To call an election, Johnson needs support from Labour as he requires the backing of two-thirds of Parliament's 650 MPs. But despite the opposition having repeatedly called for an election, Jeremy Corbyn's support is conditional.
He wants to table a motion for a general election. Fine, get the bill through first in order to take no deal off the table.
The vote wasn't Johnson's only loss that day. Earlier, he'd had to watch his government's working majority slip away as one of his own Conservative lawmakers, Philip Lee, crossed the floor of the House of Commons to join the pro-EU Liberal Democrats. In total, 21 Tory MPs, including a number of ex-cabinet ministers, voted with opposition parties to defeat the government. Afterwards, Downing Street said those MPs who had rebelled would be expelled from the Parliamentary party. The day's events have done nothing to bring any certainty to the Brexit saga. Johnson's pledge to leave with or without a deal next month and his move to shut Parliament down for 5 weeks have galvanised his critics, but what happens next remains unclear. Evelyn Laverick, Euronews.
Well, for more on this, let's go live now to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who's in Westminster. Morning, Darren. We heard there that Boris Johnson has lost control of the legislative agenda. What does that actually mean for the government?
Well, just when you think Brexit can get more extraordinary for British politics, it just seems to do that. Smash Rosie through convention, through historic records that have been around for hundreds of years. Terribly unsettling for the norm of British politics. For example, yesterday was the first time that a British Prime Minister in the first vote had been defeated since, I don't know, something like 1783. Quite extraordinary stuff, as they say. What does it mean that he has essentially lost his majority? Well, in reality, he didn't really have a majority at the start of yesterday, but it has certainly ebbed away, not least of all, as Evelyn was suggesting there, that one Conservative MP who defected to the Lib Dems meant that it had all but gone. But with the expulsion of 21 Conservative MPs, the opposition's parties and MPs now in Parliament essentially have a working majority of 44. What does that mean? It means that simply Boris Johnson is unable to govern. Governments in Britain cannot rule without the support of Parliament, and at the moment Boris Johnson simply does not have that support. That is why he is now calling for this general election, though, as Evelyn was also suggesting, that is not necessarily going to happen, because MPs seem pretty determined that today they want to try and start to enact that law, which means that Britain will not be able to leave the European Union without a deal on October 31st. And that if Boris Johnson wants his election, he's going to need two-thirds of them to back it. Now, at the moment, an election does seem somewhat inevitable at some point, probably relatively soon, but not necessarily on the timetable that the Prime Minister wants it.
Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, live outside Westminster with those Brexit developments. Thank you. Well, with the expectation that the UK is heading towards an imminent general election, Gareth Brown reports on the key figures likely to play an influential role in what happens next in British politics.
British politics has never been so divided. Brexit has put paid long-standing party loyalties, but, as always, any general election will be won by the candidate who voters believe has the country's best interests at heart. Enter Boris Johnson, leader of the Conservative Party and the current Prime Minister, having won a ballot of MPs and party members earlier this year. Before entering politics, he was a journalist, though he was fired from that job for making up quotes. A former two-term mayor of London, he's a strong electoral campaigner and says his mission is to carry out the will of the people and leave the EU. No ifs, no buts. Then, of course, there's Labour's Jeremy Corbyn. From the party's hard left, the leader of the opposition is a controversial figure, but remains phenomenally popular among the wider party membership. The former trade unionist is a champion of workers' rights, but his leadership of the party has been beset by a long-running anti-Semitism scandal. A Eurosceptic at heart, his position has softened, and more recently, he has pitched himself against a no-deal Brexit. Other political players include Nicola Sturgeon, Joe Swinson and Arlene Foster. Nicola Sturgeon is the Scottish National Party's leader. As First Minister of Scotland, she won't be standing as an MP in Westminster, but may be open to an alliance in return for the promise of a second Scottish independence referendum. Joe Swinson is leader of the Liberal Democrats. The party has picked up a number of defectors thanks to its explicitly pro-EU position. Arlene Foster, leader of the Democratic Unionists in Northern Ireland. She found herself as kingmaker in 2017, propping up the Conservative government after the last election. And of course, there's Nigel Farage, leader of the deeply Eurosceptic Brexit party. His price for a possible electoral pact with Boris Johnson? A fast and clean break from the EU. Gareth Brown, Euronews.